putting it together, and I'm so excited about the panel that we have today. At the end, I'll remind you of the next sessions we have and how to register for that. Just some housekeeping notes. We do have a recording of this. We will hand that out if you request it. I'll have that at the end too. You can send an email based on where you got this information. And we'll try to kind of compile some notes from all these sessions to have on the Tourism Extension website for you to access. So with that, I wanted to say a little bit about North Carolina Tourism Extension. Not everybody is familiar with our work. So we are part of the Greater Extension System here in North Carolina, one of the largest in the country, I think just behind Texas. And I am a state specialist here in tourism. We have 4 in our tourism extension program. Dr. Whitney Nolenberg, who's our department extension lead, she's on the call. She's helping out with some background stuff. So if you have questions, feel free to tag her. Dr. Carla Barbieri and Dr. Duarte Moraes are also a part of our tourism extension team. I have my email and our website here if you want more information. And our mission of tourism extension is really to support individuals and communities develop healthy, prosperous, and enduring tourism enterprises and destinations. So that's how we ended up here. At this webinar series, one of the things we like to do is see where there's kind of limited resources or availability for our tourism partners. And one thing we really recognized was that there's a lot to be learned about the connection of climate and tourism. And so we wanted to start putting things together to help our destinations and those that make up those destinations have better resilience in the future. So with that, before we get too far into this, I want to learn a little bit more from those of you that are on the call. So we have a couple of poll questions that I am going to launch. We just want to know describe your organization that you're with. You can check multiples there. If your organization has faced a disaster in the past 3 years, I purposefully didn't determine what disaster meant here. I want you to kind of leave that in your own definition. Does your organization or business have an emergency response plan? And how confident do you feel in your organization's ability to respond to a climate-related emergency? 1 is the least, 5 is the most, I believe. That's what the scale says. But if I'm incorrect, somebody let me know. Only just a minute longer. We have a few more people that haven't responded. Let's see if we get one more and then I'll share these results. No pressure. All right. So thanks for y'all being here. It looks like we have a good variety of destination organizations here, some chamber representation, nonprofits, higher ed, cooperative extension. Thanks to my extension friends for being here. We have a split on if folks have faced disaster in the past 3 years. And then a majority that either don't have an emergency response plan or don't know, which is actually very common. And then kind of mixed confidence. Nobody feels really unconfident or very confident about their ability to respond. So this is helpful for us to think about maybe what we can do with this webinar series and other resources in the future. So with that, I think we are on to introducing our panel. So we have 4 fantastic panelists today. We're going to start off with Allison Whitaker from the NC State Climate Office. Followed by that, we'll have Andrea Webster from the North Carolina State Resilience Office, which is a part of the Department of Environmental Quality. And then our friends from our state destination marketing organization, Andre Neighbors and Emily Prickett, are going to kick us off. So Allison is going to go first. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so she can share her screen. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Allison, and then she can fill you in from there. Allison is an extension associate, so an extension friend, for the North Carolina State Climate Office. She bridges the gap between cutting edge research and decision makers to equip them with the information they need to shape our changing world. Her work champions climate awareness and resilience, cultivating fairer and safer future for the citizens of North Carolina and beyond. Allison has a BA in science communication and over a decade of experience. Her most recent work has included developing and delivering strategic climate-focused learning and development programs for corporate and nonprofit leaders. And she is a native of Western North Carolina and a wonderful partner to Tourism Extension. Allison, the screen that we are seeing has notes on it, so I'm not sure if that's... There we go. That's perfect.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the introduction, Anne. I'm really happy to be here today. As Anne mentioned, I'm a native of Rutherford County in the beautiful foothills of North Carolina. And today I'm going to be sharing with you some recent examples of weather whiplash and data resources that can help support your decision making. So first, I want to tell you a little bit about the Climate Office. We are located on the NC State campus, but we're a public service center for all of North Carolina. Our mission is to translate climate information into useful and usable knowledge. And we have three mission areas. Research, we conduct projects to understand North Carolina's unique climate challenges. Education, we support all 100 counties of the state. And monitoring, we operate the North Carolina EcoNet, which consists of 45 research grade weather stations. And I'm going to share with you some images from our EcoNet and some data from that here in just a few moments. So today, we're going to be using a term called weather whiplash. This is something that we've used in the office to describe the rapid and unpredictable shifts between weather extremes. And a great example of this is September of 2024. The state saw a record-breaking wet September, which was immediately followed by the third driest October on record. This type of instability really threatens the infrastructure and natural beauty and the wonderful people that make our state a premier destination. So I've broken out weather whiplash into three categories. The first category is water where it doesn't belong, extreme heat, and workforce stability and cultural identity. So flooding remains the most devastating hazard to the tourism sector, and this is showing up more through intense storms and rising tides. The photo that you see here is from Tropical Storm Chantal. The extreme rain from the storm dropped 8 to 10 inches in roughly 12 hours on areas across the central part of our state, including counties like Alamance, Chatham, Moore, and Orange. We are seeing hurricanes shift towards more moisture-rich and slower-moving and rapidly intensifying storms. Hurricane Helene serves as a sobering example of this, becoming the deadliest and costliest storm in our state's history. 108 lives were lost and $53.6 billion in damage was incurred. Now, the North Carolina Climate Science Report projects that the strongest storms are expected to become more intense and produce heavier precipitation. Between September and October of 2025, coastal erosion reached a critical point, causing 11 homes in Buxton and one in Rodanthe to collapse into the ocean. The photo that you see here is another issue that happens at the coast, which is sunny day or high tide flooding, and this image is from Beaufort. This type of flooding is projected to become a near daily occurrence by 2100 under both the lower and the higher scenarios. We have already observed 10.5 inches of sea level rise at Duck and a little over 11 inches in Wilmington. Of course, this impacts transportation networks. During Helene, the photo on the left, North Carolina lost 150 bridges compared to only 5 lost during Hurricane Florence. The photo on the right is Highway 12, which remains a critical point of failure. A recent example here is Hurricane Erin, which thankfully did not make landfall, but still caused significant overwash and dune breaches, which closed the road and left stretches underwater. So now let's talk about extreme heat. Recent years in North Carolina have been exceptionally warm. 2024 was the state's second hottest year ever recorded, following 2019, which took the top spot. Even with 2025 ranking as the 22nd warmest, the bigger picture is really clear here. The last 11 years have all placed in the top 25 warmest on record, including 3 of the 5 hottest years ever recorded in our state. This shows up in health risk for people. And one of the ways that we have explored this in our office is to use a metric called wet bulb globe temperature. This helps model how the body handles heat, and it takes into account direct sunlight. So the image that you see here is from our EcoNet station. Each of our EcoNet stations across the state measures this metric, and it can be a vital decision-making metric for real-time situations. I'm going to include a link to this tool in your resources. And the example, a really clear example here is June 2025, June of last year. So Jockey's Ridge State Park hit extreme wet bulb globe condition levels for 47 hours. This is a threshold where heat stress can set in after only 15 minutes of exposure. So it's really important to have these kind of tools on hand. The next thing to think about with heat is that warming temperatures are significantly increasing energy required to cool facilities. We use a metric called cooling degree days to estimate energy load needed. The higher the number, the higher the energy load. Since the 1970s, cooling degree days have trended upward, hitting record highs since 2010. By 2060, cooling degree days are projected to increase by as much as 800 per year in the Piedmont and coastal plain. And these images, again, are from the North Carolina Climate Science Report, which will also be linked in your resources. The last piece I want to talk about here is resident and cultural stability. The tourism industry's resilience really depends on a stable workforce and the preservation of our cultural identity. Disasters often place the heaviest burden on families in lower cost housing because these homes are frequently located in high risk areas, often outside of official flood zones. These neighbors face greater danger with fewer protections. And when housing is destroyed, as we see here in Swannanoa during Hurricane Helene, where the water reached rooftops, local workforce loses the ability to live near their places of employment. But climate hazards don't just damage infrastructure, they threaten the very identity of our communities. In the wake of Helene, towns like Chimney Rock and Lake Lure, where I'm from in Rutherford County, saw more than just scenery disappear. Entire businesses, homes, and generations of local history were devastated by the debris-laden floodwaters. Furthermore, persistent wildfire smoke from post-hurricane debris or drought-fueled blazes can result in locally unhealthy air quality, deterring visitors from mountain and coastal forests. Now, we have an air quality tool that I'm also going to include in your resource packet, documenting or helping you support your decision-making on air quality issues. And the last thing I want to note is I want to share our climate blog. This comes out about once a month. I would highly recommend that you subscribe to it. It helps to kind of put into context what we're seeing and digest everything for you in a really understandable way. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that we have.
Thanks, Allison. Yeah, if anybody has any questions at the moment, or we can come at the end and see kind of what you all are thinking about. I forgot to mention at the beginning, feel free to drop questions anytime in the Q&A box or in the chat box. So you can see Whitney's in there answering everything, but we'll make sure we kind of have a list. So if there's anybody specific that you want to reach out to, you can put that in there. And if we don't have a chance for questions, so we'll make sure that we can try to follow up with any answers that might be necessary. So Allison kicked us off with the kind of defining the problem, especially around tourism. And we're going to have Andrea follow up and tell us about how the state is responding. So Andrea is the Resilience Policy Advisor for North Carolina's State Resilience Office. She works across state agencies and with local governments to increase community resilience to the impacts of natural hazards and climate change. In past positions, she has worked with the local governments in Indiana, Kentucky, and New Hampshire, wide swath there, on climate mitigation and adaptation. She holds a Master's of Public Administration and a Master of Science and Environmental Studies, and we're excited that she's here today. Slide looks good.
Right, excellent. Well, thanks so much, Anne. Like Allison, I'm really excited to be here today, especially for the kickoff of this new webinar series. It's such an important topic we're talking about today. I'm going to talk about some resources that we have developed through state government agencies in North Carolina to help communities manage their tourism economies. I work with local governments quite a bit, and when I ask them this question of, well, how are you protecting your tourism economy when you're thinking about climate change resilience? And they just have no idea what to say. So I was really excited when Anne contacted me about this opportunity. So as Anne mentioned, I work with our State Resilience Office, which is part of our North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. We've been part of North Carolina's state government since 2019, and my colleagues and I are helping communities across the state protect their residents and their visitors from the impacts of climate change, which has a very strong focus on the natural disasters that hit our state. And I'm including this lovely Swiss cheese graphic that you probably became very familiar with during COVID. So just like, the way during the COVID pandemic, they recommended, of course, that we get a vaccine, but they also said, wear a mask, get tested, wash your hands, social distance, avoid large gatherings. You had to do all of these things to really protect yourself. And the more of those things you did, the more protected you were from the impacts of COVID. And it's the exact same thing with protecting your communities from extreme weather events. So one solution or one slice of Swiss cheese isn't going to solve the problem. There's plenty of holes in that Swiss cheese that the impact can get through. So a more resilient community has multiple protective measures in place. So a community might be managing heavy precipitation with rain gardens, but also by removing buildings from the floodplain. Maybe they also have right-sized stormwater infrastructure for these larger, heavier downpours that Allison mentioned. So, we want to try to do lots of things to really make sure there's lots of places for the water to go in this example. All right, well, when we apply this, community resilience building to the tourism economy, we're asking ourselves such questions as, well, when we first start to think about this, we're asking questions such as, where do these tourists go? And what are they doing? So, maybe they're coming in for a community event, a community festival that you have every year that you hold downtown. Or maybe you have an extensive bike path network and families come into town to ride their bikes. Or maybe, like in Wilson, you have a bunch of whirly gigs in your downtown that people come often and, stand around in the kind of developed downtown area. Or maybe outdoor recreation is a big part of your economy, and you have facilities located right next to rivers. So it's good to think about where these tourists are going, but then you also want to think and what they're doing, but you also want to think about, well, how are the natural hazards going to affect both the sites where the tourism exists and the people that are going there, and specifically how you can prevent health impacts from all of these things. So we'll start with extreme heat. When we're thinking, in this example, we have a community that features some camping. And as we know, when we're camping, we're outside. We don't have access to air conditioning. We really need to as we think about how to address this in our community, we think about, well, first, what are the heat-related illnesses that we should look out for? What characteristics make an individual more susceptible to heat-related illness? And in the state of North Carolina, we have a few resources for this. So our North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services has two web pages. One web page lists the signs of heat illness and what to do. So this is just a few of them you're seeing on the screen. We have the illnesses caused by heat, the signs and symptoms of those illnesses, so you know how to recognize them, but also what to do. So, we're encouraging people to drink fluids when they have heat cramps. We are asking them to sit or lie down in a cool place when they're fainting or feeling dizzy. So it's good to become familiar with the kind of basics first and foremost. And the next step would be to think about, well, when do we act? And so in this case, maybe the question is, at what heat index should we start warning tourists about heat-related illnesses? And when are we going to actually restrict access to outdoor activities? So in North Carolina, we have a few resources, and one is that I should say, several partners in the state. We have climate scientists and health experts that have come together to develop these heat index thresholds. And so these partners came together and they compare the number of people going to the emergency department each day with the heat index. So these are the heat indices at which point those visits to the emergency room spike in each region of the state. And you can see that there's a threshold for the early season, the mid-heat season, I should say, and late heat season. That's because we are all acclimating to heat differently in different parts of heat season. So these numbers are much lower in the early part of the heat season because our bodies are less acclimated. And I'll point out here that these are, mostly based on numbers for residents. So you may have people coming from the south, coming up north where they can withstand heat more, or you may have people coming from colder areas where they're just completely blasted by the heat for the first time in a long time. And so they may not be able to withstand those temperatures as much. This slide also mentions the heat action plan template and toolkit and some heat health alerts. So in your community in North Carolina, you can sign up for these heat health alerts and receive an email anytime extreme heat is expected to surpass these temperatures in your area. So you can get a heads up of when those times are coming. And then our heat action plan template and toolkit, which I'll talk even more about later. So in this document, it provides a lot of information about these topics much more in depth. Okay, so a next thing you might ask yourself when you're trying to consider how to help our tourists manage extreme heat is how often we can expect the heat index to surpass the threshold. So you might think about past occurrences. How often has this happened in the past? And so the State Climate Office has a tool called Station Scout. And so you can go on this tool and look up for your community how many times the temperature surpassed a specific heat index or a specific temperature in whatever year you want to look into. Additionally, you can go to a website we have in North Carolina called the North Carolina Resilience Exchange. There is a site that has climate projections. I have a QR code, but I think we're putting those in the chat as well. So on this website, you can select extreme heat, and you can see the number of days your specific community, on average, surpasses or reaches 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So between 1983 and 2014, on average, Carrboro, North Carolina, and Orange County, in the center of the state, they're typically surpassing 95 degrees Fahrenheit about 8 times a year, 8 days a year. By the 2060s, Carrboro can expect to surpass or reach 95 degrees Fahrenheit between 28 and 41 days a year. So they're jumping from 1 week to to about a month or more every year. We can look at the same numbers for 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I really want to emphasize this piece. So this is the nights when our temperatures don't get down below 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is going to be really important for those folks that are camping outside, especially for multiple days in a row. Because when our bodies don't have a chance to cool down at night, that's when we greatly increase the chance of heat-related illness. Okay, so now what can we do? Well, we can adopt and promote a flag system. to indicate dangerous heat conditions during heat waves. So this is something the US military uses. It replicates the public beach flag system you may have seen that notifies visitors when conditions are unsafe for swimming. So when a heat wave is in the forecast, an entity will post a flag of a certain color in front of park entrances, athletic parks, trailheads. They may even have a person stationed there to educate folks. And then they also can have signs that can help educate residents on what the meanings of those flags are. There are so many more things that you can do. There's lots of initiatives listed in the Heat Action Plan Toolkit. We have an actions database on the Resilience Exchange. This example shows where they're doing employer and worker training. So maybe there's some training that happens in your tourism economy on the dangers of extreme heat. Okay, so that was a lot of resources and talk about extreme heat. It's a lot to kind of process all at once in my 10-minute presentation here. So I want to say that we have a Planning for Extreme cohort program available to local governments and their partners in North Carolina. We walk them through the toolkit. We have a template plan. The second chapter of that plan is focused on heat action protocol. So it really shows how to, like the things you implement when you pass that specific threshold. So joining this cohort program, which is hosted by both Allison and myself and one of our colleagues, so we'll walk you through all this stuff at a more reasonable pace. Okay, jumping into floods, we want to protect our tourism economy from floods. And so the first question we might ask here is, well, how do I determine what businesses are at risk of flooding? So there are two resources here I'll point out. Again, on this North Carolina Resilience Exchange, there are a set of vulnerability maps. They include this North Carolina emergency management advisory floodplain layer. So I'm going to move on to the next slide and you can see the comparison. So we include two separate flood layers here. And so this is Rocky Mount, North Carolina, another community in the center part of the state. And so we have probably heard of the FEMA floodplain. So you've probably heard, well, if you're in the 100-year floodplain, they call it, you are required to have flood insurance. And so that's what's shown in blue here. And then in yellow is, well, they call it the 500-year floodplain, or the 0.2% chance of flood hazard. But, you know, I think I wouldn't pay too much attention to the nomenclature for these flood zones. But what you should know is that these are areas likely to flood, and these areas are flooding much more frequently they have in the past for the reasons that Allison stated. And these are the floodplain. These are the lines that FEMA draws that they have certain regulations over. But in North Carolina, we also have what we call an advisory floodplain, or this is where we really see flood risk outside of the floodplain. So what that means is that people in this blue area are likely to have insurance for flooding, but all these people out here do not have insurance. And that can really kill a business or a homeowner, and because our regular home insurance does not cover this. So, you know, you can zoom into these maps, turn on the building layer, you can figure out, you know, because you're familiar with your community, which of these buildings are hosting tourists, and then you can work with them to figure out what to do about that situation. So unlike heat, you know, when you're working with extreme heat, I know we have people from outside of North Carolina here today. When we're thinking about extreme heat, you know, all of the solutions are kind of the same. Maybe we're just implementing them at different thresholds or different times that we reach a temperature or heat index. But with flooding, it's much more site specific. And so I would encourage you to talk to the State Resilience Office or State Climate Office. There's so many resources to help you get started on this. This is our generic email. It also goes to me, as it turns out, but I'll share my email at the end as well. I want to share one example about flooding and tourism. As Allison said, we're getting a lot more heavy precipitation events. That means that we're having more instances of flash flooding and high river water levels, fast moving rivers. And the folks that kind of manage some recreation or even participate in recreation on the Haw River in North Carolina got together and said, you know, we're concerned, what can we do about this? And so they installed signage with road names on 3 bridges overpassing the Haw River. For those of you that have done kayaking or canoeing or any kind of watercraft tube floating, I never know where I am when I'm floating down a river. And so this really helps, especially when river floaters need to call for emergency rescue. They're going to get rescued faster if they have a sense of where they are. And those river bridge signage can really help with that. This group also is installing electric kiosks at the kind of put-ins for the canoes and kayaks. And that kiosk shares whether or not it's recommended to be on the river. Oftentimes, you know, there are websites you can go to identify the cubic feet per second that water is flowing, but those are just numbers to me and they mean nothing. So it's better to have a kiosk saying, do not get on the river today. And one anecdotal story I can share with you is that, so Allison showed a picture of Hurricane Chantal. And so one of the river keepers in the area happened to be out measuring water levels after Hurricane Chantal, and she came upon a family who just happened to be driving from Florida to Maine, and they saw this great river, and they thought, oh, like, we've got kayaks in our car, we're just going to get on the river. They had no idea that it was 9 feet above flood state, like its normal level. And this riverkeeper tried her best to keep this family off the river, and she could not convince them not to go. And so the only thing she could do was just call the emergency folks and let them know there was a family getting on the river at that point in time. So, you know, this stuff does happen and it's dangerous, but there are things we can do to save lives. Okay, as I wrap up today, I want to reiterate the heat action planning cohort that I mentioned before. I also want to mention this North Carolina Resilience Exchange website. This is in North Carolina where we aggregate all the resources to help communities build resilience to the impact of these extreme weather events. So there's tons of resources there, but you know, above all, please reach out to me. We love to hear from folks working on this stuff. We can't do this on our own. We need community partners. And so we're happy to partner with you to make some things happen.
Thanks, Andrea. That was great. And for folks on the call, we'll definitely compile all of the resources that are being mentioned here and send it out after, and make sure that you have contact information for these folks to ask questions or get involved where you see necessary. We'll go ahead and pass it over to our Visit NC folks, and then we'll come back at the end for questions. Folks, be thinking about your questions. We have some great information and examples that have been provided. So with that, we have 2 folks from Visit North Carolina today, our state destination marketing organization. First, we have Andre Neighbors, who has served as the Partner and Community Relations Manager for Visit NC, a unit of the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina since 2014. His role is working with communities through North Carolina, helping with sustainable efforts to market and promote the state's natural, historic, and cultural resources for communities, nonprofits, and tourism-related entities to improve tourism product and visitation across North Carolina. Andre is a dear partner of ours in Tourism Extension. We get to do a lot of fun projects together. Emily Prickett is also with us, and she's the public relations specialist for Visit North Carolina. She shares the stories of destinations across the state by coordinating individual media visits and group familiarization tours for journalists, generating meaningful earned media coverage. She also helps plan and host media events throughout the year to strengthen relationships between journalists and destination partners. And Emily is a graduate of the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management program here at NC State, and she worked with me in Tourism Extension for several years before joining Visit NC. Our Visit NC folks are going to tell us about tourism and particularly about the response to Helene and kind of where the state office lies within that. So I'll let y'all take it away. Thank you.
Thanks. No, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ed, and appreciate you guys having us here today. So yeah, we're just going to talk a little bit about how we looked at recovery and how we got the message out for Hurricane Helene. We know that there was just a lot of information, a lot of misinformation out there going around. So we want to make sure we convey the proper message and perception for North Carolina. And Ann, definitely keep me on task. I do have my notes here because I am the son of a Baptist minister, so I can go off the rails as I just did, as you can tell. So I thought we'd start off with a little background, even just some additional background that Allison actually shared earlier. But Hurricane Helene, of course, hit North Carolina in late September of 2024, bringing incredible destruction. It is estimated to have been responsible for more than $78 billion in damages, although that number is very conservative. And over 30 inches of rain fell in 48 hours, and there was more than 2,000 landslides during that particular time. Obviously, the media was very focused on the devastation from the start. Visit and See here, we immediately paused all of our advertising. Even areas of the state not affected by the hurricane, we knew that it was not the right time for promotion. And we made assessments on a daily basis to understand when the appropriate time to support those areas when those areas would be open, and other areas as they come back online. We worked hard to balance the interests of partners in all 100 counties. Paid social was also paused while monitored and evaluated organic on a daily basis. Organic messaging shifted to be supportive, provide access to resources, and encourage those willing and able to contribute to recovery efforts. Social listening kind of takeaways that we had: 54% of social mentions regarding North Carolina travel since 2025 mentioned Hurricane Helene, not including TikTok, which is also seeing a high volume of mention. Aftermath of the storm began heavily politicized across all platforms. So again, we had to be careful of conspiracies and misinformation floating around about North Carolina destinations. And to the mountain regions of our state, Western North Carolina, Q4 is critical. Nearly a third of a mountain spending occurs in the fourth quarter. The majority of October, 2.1 billion. In fact, our early estimates of visitor spending losses from the hurricane was 2.1 billion, based on previous estimates. So we wanted to really work on partner outreach. So we were in constant communication with partners and potential travelers. We knew how important staying in communication would be, given the difficult circumstances with power and cell service outages among all the other challenges. This really helped to frame Visit and See's response and efforts to communicate the travelers on our partners' behalf. We had an immediate shift from promoting travel to quickly assessing the situation and responsibly communicating helpful information to our audiences. Following the governor's lead and other state agencies' lead and direction, recommending where not to travel, calling ahead and confirm plans and whether it's safe to travel, providing direct and credible information sources, are encouraged to provide access to those able and willing to contribute to recovery efforts, and being sensitive and empathetic to the impact.
So, as Ann mentioned, I am on the public relations team here at Visit and See, and a lot of the effects of disaster on tourism is just perception, and public relations is all about perception, how people perceive how an event occurred and what kind of information is flowing through the media. And so there was actually a lot of negative perceptions that came from this, of people just not knowing the geography of North Carolina, not knowing which parts were actually affected and which parts were completely untouched and fine to travel to. And so in that first week after, there was more than 1,000 articles published about North Carolina and about the disaster, which is a huge influx of what we normally have going on. And a lot of it was misinformation or just really doom and gloom and just not good for tourists to be intaking all the information. And so it started to decrease every day after that peak on 9:30. And as you can see, the total estimated views was huge number. So it wasn't just locals seeing these posts, it was all around the world. People were seeing the impacts that Helene had. And this isn't just about Helene, this happens with any kind of disaster. We see this kind of coverage coming out. And so we had to, as the public relations team, actively try and work against these negative emotions that were being put out into the media and try and tell the positive story. And so one way that we do that is by hosting journalists to actually show them that parts of North Carolina are open. And while some were just in the process of opening, that they still had stories that were important to get out there, because Asheville was almost like the chosen one that everyone knew about and wanted to support. But there were also these smaller towns around them, such as Marshall or Hot Springs in Madison County, and so many other countless ones that were still heavily affected, but they weren't just as well known, so people didn't know to support them. So it was our job as the PR team to take journalists there to show them that they need the same help that Asheville needs, and that they were starting to open back up, and to send those positive feedback. And so one of the small things that we did in public relations to help with this was to just focus on our verbiage, because a lot of perception is just how you word things. And so one way that we did this, and that we encouraged our partners to, was to use the word milestone when it came to last year, when it was the 1 year, instead of saying anniversary. Since that has more of a connotation of celebration, we wanted it to be more about power and more about resilience, and the fact that Western North Carolina was stronger than ever, that they were ready to welcome tourists back, and that this wasn't something that we really celebrate, but it is something that they were proud of, that their community was able to come together and to present their destination again to tourists. And so we were able to get this coverage from one of our familiarization tours that was all about rediscovering the mountains, that they were different. We're not saying that they were the same, because disaster a lot of times does change the way a destination looks. But it's important to let people know that just because it's different doesn't mean it's not even better than it was. But that is a challenge to convince tourists that they actually can come back after a disaster, and that it is still going to be a great experience. And so another way that Visit NC tried to help get the message out post-disaster is that they go where people get their source of information, and they try and be very informative. So in that bottom right picture, you can see the map that really try to focus on where you can go. So those green areas, we were still encouraging people to please visit, please support as a tourist. And then those yellow places, you might need to call ahead. Like Andre said, we were trying to be informative of like the best ways to get in contact with those destinations. And then the red areas where we just kindly asked people to try and support from afar, but that they weren't open and ready to be visited yet. And so this was a great way that Visit NC was also able to help spread the message, as at the state level, we do have that ability to kind of get the word out there, even though we are not the ones that are physically in the destination. So we try and provide support in that way as well.
So I lost my place here. So we're kind of looking at the duration of hurricane of Helene's tourism impact as well. Kind of doing some comparisons again with Katrina, Keith, Ivan, and those perceptions as well. Wait, go to the next slide. So our preliminary research. That's one of the things that we really kind of focused on, as well as really doing the research and again having the right message that we put out there. So in addition to our economic research, we knew that it would be important to understand what potential travelers perceived the status of the recovery to be. So that we could adjust our marketing, so we can adjust our marketing appropriately. As part of our regular analysis of the awareness of our paid media efforts made, particularly in that October with Samara Insights, we added some hurricane perception questions to get a quick understanding of perception and misperceptions of the status of travel in Western North Carolina. Research was fielded in our core and secondary markets, as well as several test markets over the period of basically between that October 14th and the 20th. So in this research, it was fielded in mid-October. We learned that the likelihood to visit, inclusive of all markets, fell from about 31% in August to just 27% in October. Of the 47% who were not at least somewhat likely to visit North Carolina in the next year, a third said it was because of concerns about storm damage from Hurricane Lane. I mean, who would ever thought that a hurricane would hit the mountains? I mean, that's just incredible. But across all target markets, this netted about 15% of all travelers not likely to visit the state in the next year because of the storm damage. So what we did next, we knew from the research just showed that there were misconceptions on the status of hurricane damage and recovery, and they varied by market. But knowing also that the majority of the state was not damaged by the storm and these areas needed visitation, we knew we needed to get back into the market. I mean, some people would call us and say they were traveling to the Outer Banks, wanting to know about the storm damage. So again, having that, being able to get that messaging out there and those misconceptions was very crucial for us. So additional research with Samara allowed us to test creative, that would be used in the Piedmont and coast to reassure potential visitors that these regions were open and welcome to visitors. We also we were able to understand the messaging needs for those areas not affected by the hurricane by testing produced spots specific for the recovery time as compared to our regular campaign ads. We also worked with the MMGY on sentiment research to help us understand how long to stay in the market with messaging and when it is safe to switch back to our regular campaign. We waited to begin the research after November elections, of course, of last year. This research helped, and it's still helping us to understand how the hurricane has impacted visitors' feelings about safety and security in the area, measure the likelihood of potential visitors to travel to the affected region post-hurricane, gather insights on specific concerns or barriers that may be deterring visitors, such as property damage, such as accessibility, infrastructure issues, health risk, etc. And also determine what information prospective visitors need to feel comfortable planning a trip, such as updates on recovery efforts, safety measures, available attractions, and evaluate how the hurricane has influenced perception of local brands, attractions, overall destinations as well. So some next steps. Again, we were basically armed with the early data that worked quickly, for our next steps. I mean, reasons for not visiting on the mountain regions you can kind of see here. And I think, by the way, Ed is going to provide these slides for everybody here as well. I'm probably going to go through some of our slides a little quickly because just on the essence of time. But again, our reservations, after September 27th of 2024, 36% reported that their plans were impacted by Hurricane Helene. So you can kind of see here in this slide here, kind of the effects that the hurricane had on visitation to the region. Are you ready? Next slide. And I'll pass it back over to Emily.
So not only was it PR's job to work on that earned media side of things with journalists, but we also wanted to put out positive messaging with our marketing to be able to change that perception of that the mountains were closed down, that they were weaker than they had been before, but that really they were ready to welcome tourists back and that they were ready to be rediscovered. And so we worked with Governor Josh Stein on this campaign to rediscover the unforgettable. And we wanted to encourage people to visit the mountains of North Carolina. So we actually have one of those video clips for y'all to watch. And I think it'll play. Oh, maybe not. There it goes.
Emily, how about we share the clip? We're running short on time and I want to make sure we can answer some of the questions.
Okay, yeah, perfect. You can also, I believe, find these on the Visit NC
YouTube page.
So, yeah, they both work. Okay, here we go. And then, like I said, we'll share these slides so y'all can look at these data just about the reasons for disinterest of people not wanting to visit. And then we also just wanted to get some actual feedback from people of why that they saw it was impacted from it. And so some was positive that they just wanted to be able to support it more, or the only things that they have heard about the mountains was just the natural disasters and they didn't really know that if it was okay to visit or not. And so we had lots of information coming through that year since the milestone and finding out that some of those perceptions had gotten better, but still people just didn't know. And so it's just a matter of educating people on the recovery. And this was just what came from our mountain recovery campaign and how we were able to spread that word of that they were back and they wanted their tourists to come back as well. So thank you.
Thank you much.
Thank y'all. We have questions rolling in here, I see. First, I see Lynn put some questions in the chat for Allison and Andrea. Are the equivalents of your functions in other states? What words should we search to locate similar departments or agencies? It's a great question. We'll start with that and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So there are, I think maybe more than half of the states have a resilience office or resilience staff and within state government that are trying to coordinate with local governments and doing this work. So searching terms for like state government resilience, state government sustainability, or environmental protection. I think starting with your departments of environmental quality is probably a really great place to start.
I'll add that not every state has a state climate office, but nearly all the states have a state climatologist. And so that's an office that you can reach out to for specific information. And then you can also search and see if you have a climate science report for your state. I know this is becoming a trend that we're seeing more often.
Thank y'all. And Andrea, it looks like Lynn wanted to build off that, looking at the floodplain risk map that you provided, where in North Carolina home buyers or folks might be able to find similar maps in other states, or how to search for if those exist.
Yeah, so I would go to your state environmental management, or I'm sorry, emergency management division. So I think if you just type in state government and emergency management, those are the entities that are going to hold the kind of state verified floodplain maps. There's also, I know North Carolina has specific staff that are working on that, but more closely with FEMA, and I know other states don't work quite as closely with FEMA. So turning to FEMA's flood maps is also a really good place to start. Allison, maybe you know of other kind of typical flood maps that are available nationally. I don't know if you've come across those. No.
All right, thank you. I was worried about y'all's question asking, but y'all really came through here. Looks like we have a couple questions for Visit NC. Are there any plans or actions to deal with misinformation or negative perceptions caused specifically by fake disaster pictures and videos created by AI? Great question.
Yeah, this was something that we had to consider coming around the milestone because we knew that a lot of things would be resurfacing. And I think the most important thing for us was just trying to get more positive information out there so that way it would just kind of cover it up. We didn't actually have a lot of bad stuff that we had to worry about. It was mainly positive, which was really good. But I definitely think it's just a matter of getting more positive out there than the negative because we can't really control what people put out there. So,
And that milestone was the 1 year anniversary in September.
yes.
Okay. And then there's another question about an incident response team internally before the disaster. How did you set up internal cross-departmental processes for aligning research, public relations, and marketing?
For residency, can you say that one again? Yeah, can you say that one again? Yeah.
Did you have an incident response team internally before the disaster? How did you set up the internal cross-departmental process for aligning research, PR, and marketing to mitigate the crisis? I think. Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, I don't think we had a response team just kind of set up because it was kind of surprising. I think we just we had a lot of partners that we really work with, and I think we relied on a lot of our partners for information as well. But PR wise, I mean,
I think for the most part, it was we reached out to partners to see what intel they had and what processes they were putting into place. And then we just kind of worked on collecting all of that information together and then distributing as needed. So.
And we had a lot of partners that really pitched in to help a lot of communities within that area. So they were a tremendous resource and help for us as well as far as getting the word out about what was happening in those areas.
Yeah, and I think also some folks might not realize how small Visit NC's staff is. It's a really small team that's really connected, so that having an internal team within it might not be the most effective way for y'all to function.
Right.
Some state agencies are quite large, but that's not the case with Visit NC.
Quite large. Now we did have a response. So many people don't know that our call center. This is kind of interesting. Our call center is actually at the women's prison. So they work very closely with DOT as well, and so a lot of times, so they were open 24 hours a day, mainly because they were there. At least we hope they were there all the time. So a lot of the response, we had a lot of information. People were able to reach out to the call center to get more information as well, whether it was through DOT or whatever they were looking for, coming within the area. So that was a big part. I think that helped us as well as far as that messaging and having that information out there for those that weren't sure what was going on.
Absolutely. And Sharon, I saw your question in the chat. We'll make sure we get you an answer to follow up, but we're at 1 o'clock and I want to respect everyone's time. Just to remind you, we have some upcoming sessions. Our next one, we're going to have folks from Visit Asheville on to talk about their Love Asheville from Afar campaign. And our friends in Greenville, South Carolina are going to join us to talk about a new nonprofit that they set up, a la carte Greenville, that supports the tourism workforce there. If you registered for this session, you had an option to register for all of them. We'll follow up with all these resources, but please feel free to reach out with any questions. And we have a final survey for you. It'll also come in an email, but that's your chance to tell us about things you want to hear more about, so that when we plan this series next time, we can make sure that we're incorporating some of those ideas or expertise that you might have. So thank you all so much for joining us for this first session. Hopefully we see you for many more. And thanks so much to our panelists for all of the information that you shared.